Hi, everyone, and welcome to my very first interview with someone that has a lot of wisdom and insight to share. Welcome, Rumbi Munyaradzi. He is the COO, Chief Operating Officer at Sasai Super App. And what was fascinating about Rumbi as I was following her on LinkedIn and engaging with her on LinkedIn is that she was daring enough to actually take a sabbatical in her career to figure out her next step. Now, I've been working in higher education for over 10 years, and the concept of a sabbatical was where I first encountered academics being able to take time off from their normal everyday role to focus on research. So I thought, hey, that's really nice, but only a few people get to do it. So Rumbi was not specifically an academic in education, but she had said, hey, I want to figure out what's happening with my career. I'm taking a sabbatical break from my everyday roles and figuring out what's the next step. So Rumbi, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate us giving some time to really tap into your wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Rumbi, we're going to go into some questions just to get to know you. Tell us, what is your favorite food?
I love so many different things, but if I had to choose one dish in particular, it would be something from my home country, which is Zimbabwe. And I'd say it's a meal of sadza, which is similar to pap, and oxtail.
Oh, yum. That sounds so good.
And hearty.
This is something you have like birthdays and Christmases and things like that.
Or just on a hot summer afternoon when you just want to have that soul food feeling.
Yeah, soul food. That's awesome. What is your favorite pastime when you're not re-engineering your career path?
A favorite pastime, I'd say, is reading. I'm a very avid reader, and I have been since a very young age. And I try to read at least one book a month. Usually I read more than that, but the minimum is one.
Wow, that's amazing. And if you are a voracious reader, it helps you to be a good writer. And I know you are that as well. We'll get more into that as we go along. What's your favorite TV show? What are you currently binging on at the moment?
Okay, so I've been so busy lately that I don't currently have a favorite, but the one that I have always consistently enjoyed is a show called Queen Sugar. It's about a family in the US that's just going through modern life as Black people in America and all of the trials that brings. And I just think it's like such rich storytelling, beautifully choreographed and filmed.
I'm going to make a note to check that out. Queen Sugar sounds interesting. So we just wanted to kind of get to know a bit about you as a normal everyday person, because I think sometimes when we listen to people in podcasts, they almost have this like otherworldly sense or larger than life, and we're ordinary people trying to do extraordinary things, right? So we're going to go and get into our time machine right now, okay, Rumbi, and we're going to travel back to when you were 17 years old. You were facing those questions that the older people ask us. What are you going to do with your life? And how are you supposed to know that at 17 anyway? Take us to that moment, and what were you planning for your future?
When I was 17, I had, so under the Zimbabwean school system, from O levels, you have, at that stage, you're doing about 10 subjects, 12 subjects. In my case, I did 10 O level subjects. And then you get funneled down into a fewer set of subjects called A levels. And at that stage, you're doing 3 or 4 subjects, right? I had chosen maths, biology, and chemistry. And I was undecided, but I had inklings of wanting to be a doctor.
Wow.
By virtue of choosing the maths, bio, and chemistry. And I remember in the beginning, I actually had added English literature as a 4th subject when I was 17, and then I dropped that. I dropped that in my final year, so I could just focus on my sciences, because the learning curve was getting real. So I had to
chemistry, yeah.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I have to get to a point where I'm just focusing on the sciences. So even back then, that love for English literature was something that was always in my mind. And I didn't want to have to choose between being an avid reader and someone who enjoys writing and sciences, but the way that the curricula was set up forced me to do that. So
Yeah.
anyway, I did have to focus, and I chose, and I initially thought medicine, but then the more I progressed with my A-level studies, the more I stopped enjoying the medicine track. I was now starting to be very, very practical to say, would I really want to spend 5 to 10 years specializing and studying? And does it feel practical for my personality to go down that path? And so even though at that time I hadn't actually met any doctors yet, but I was just thinking through, like, from a research point of view, would it be a right fit? And already in high school, I was starting to move away from that. And I was really enjoying maths. So by the time I finished my A-levels, I was now quite interested in doing something that would use mathematics, be that actuarial science or commercial or other commercial subjects that would anchor around mathematics.
Rumbi, I love that you are actually talking about you firstly, number one, have a very good self-awareness, I think, for your 17-year-old self going back in time, because what you're showing there is that you did notice that you had these dual interests that seem to be at odds with each other based on how the system is set up, and kind of forcing you to choose something instead of trying to help you to cultivate both at the same time. It's not maybe always practical, but then choosing the mathematics route, how did you then choose that? Was it because you just felt like that was more of your interest, or that was kind of where you wanted to focus? I like that you considered the doctor route and thinking, don't want to do 10 years, so I think, yeah, take us more into that. So what kind of professions were you looking at with your mathematics interests? What were you seeing for yourself there?
It actually wasn't that deep. So
Okay.
when I was trying to think of how to use mathematics, I talked to my teacher. I really, really got along with my upper sixth maths teacher. And I said, what does one do with maths? And so she put me onto actuarial science. And she said, she did warn me that, look, it's quite difficult, and it would allow me to have my options open for working in the insurance industry as well as banking. But she did warn me that there are easier ways to get into those industries. But if you do the hardest thing, it keeps all your options, versus trying to do something easy and then potentially having to back solve for the harder qualifications down the line. So I actually made that application I only applied to 2 universities in South Africa for actuarial science. I applied to UCT and to VIT when it came to actuarial science. And that's those are my 2 choices when it came to South Africa. I also had applied to a university in the US. I was also quite keen to live
international study.
Exactly. And life economically, Zimbabwe was already becoming quite a tough environment. And I understood that from a scholarship point of view, America had a huge array of academic scholarships available. I even sat for my SATs. I've got a decent score. And on the back of my SAT score, I got a partial scholarship to St. John's University in New York. I was very keen on it. But then even with it wasn't a full scholarship. That's the thing. And the price that was still quite high. And my parents also had a preference for me to be quite close to home. So between not being able to plug the gap, I ended up choosing universities in South Africa. And then even the choice between UCT and WITS, because I was so adamant about this maths orientation, right? UCT gave me a commercial degree, but not actuarial science. Only WITS gave it to me. So that's how I ended up with WITS.
Interesting. I love that your teacher gave you such sage advice, and then you actually took it to say, take the most challenging route, because if you can face that and take that challenge, it opens up other opportunities versus go to the path of least resistance, which I think is actually detrimental for young people to have. Like in South Africa, there's the distinction between maths literacy and then the pure maths. And then so they take math literacy because it seems to be the easier path. But then when they have to apply to university, they actually can't get the credits that they need to be able to apply for what they want. So I love that we need more of those teachers to say, hey, take the path of resistance. It's going to help you make you stronger and open up more opportunities. I love that.
Doing the hard thing first, I actually find has been like a very big guiding principle for my life. Doesn't mean that I succeed with the hard thing, but at least trying to do the hard thing first, it allows me to one, scope out my boundaries. And two, when I then change, I know it's not for lack of trying, right? Because you said something earlier about self-awareness. I am a pretty self-aware individual. And I always know if I'm genuinely doing my best. There are times when you allow yourself to say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm not going to do my best. I'll just do it. But there are times where, for me, being type A, I know if I'm not pushing, right? I know if I'm not pushing. So that actually leaves me unsatisfied when I could be doing the hard thing and I'm coasting along. So and I think, yeah.
No, go for it. Please complete your sentence.
Sure. I was just going to say that, most of the people watching this have been through an education system where you have to learn those multiple subjects, right? So like I said, O levels for me, I had 10 subjects and I enjoyed the variety that it brought because it was a combination of the arts and the sciences. The only thing that I did not try with any degree of proficiency was art. I was terrible at art. And
I mean like painting and drawing, because you were good with the writing part.
Correct. Painting and drawing was not my jam at all. I was like,
me too. I cannot. I wish I could, but I color in words like you do, Rumbi.
Exactly. And even knowing that sometimes, that experience of coming lost in art, like for 2 years, was dragging down my average. And I was so about saying I need high averages that I was not going to let art get in the way. So I enjoyed it, even though I was bad at it. And I just said, look, it's going to become a hobby. I don't have to do it at school. I'm going to have to find some of the expression of my interest in something of this nature.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that we don't have to be great at everything. We have certain aptitudes and abilities that make us great at a few things. And even, if we have what seems to be a contradictory interest of like science and art, they can actually blend together and they can complement each other in different ways, because art requires creativity and so does science in a different way. So you're actually bringing your whole brain together to solve problems more creatively. So there's a lot of benefits around there. So let's now fast forward in our time machine to you were at Wits, you completed your degree. How did you find your first job? I think that's something that a lot of young people need some guidance and support in. So please share your story with us.
Sure. So my first job was actually my 3rd year of university. So so caveat here. I mentioned earlier that I did actuarial science. I chose actuarial science as my first degree. I went through one semester. Suffice it to say, I was catching a flame. I found it very difficult. And actuarial science taught me that some things are about a particular aptitude. Like I actually am not wired for it. And it took me a while to realize that I wasn't dumb, because like I'm saying, for the first time in my life, I was not passing exams. I was feeling very frustrated because I wasn't doing well. And I had to realize that there's a difference between having an aptitude for something versus your actual intelligence. It just wasn't for me. So I switched to a BCom degree because I don't know if this is still the case, but back then, the actuarial science degree in the first year was basically a BCom and finance degree plus 1 or 2 courses that were tailored for actuarial science. So I was actually able to drop the 1 or 2
because you were on the BCom track, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it was actuarial science plus statistics that I dropped, and then I continued with a normal BCom curriculum without losing any time. And also, to be honest, I wanted to make sure that I had quick wins to get back into that vein of feeling self-confident. And I also didn't want to waste any tuition, right? Because
Yes.
supplementary exams, all that kind of stuff was not really an option for me, financially wise. So because I was now in the realm of a BCom finance degree, I was now spending a lot more time worrying about corporate finance principles, reading the Business Day magazine every other day, newspaper, I mean, and just immersing myself in the world of finance. So when I heard about the Standard Bank internship program that they ran, the qualifying criteria was that you had to be at least a second-year student in a finance and economics discipline. So I applied in my second year for that program. I got it. And then during the because it was done during the December to January holiday period.
Yes.
And one of our projects was to do a branch survey. And when I was at that branch, I met the branch manager, and I told her, oh, this is my story. I'm enjoying corporate finance. I'd love to have a job that I can do on a part-time basis during my third year. And I basically sent her my CV and peppered her with attention, and she agreed eventually. I'm not the typical candidate for that kind of job, but she was willing to trust a 20-year-old with a customer-facing role where I was an in-branch consultant processing transactions and just addressing any customer problems that came up, right? And so someone like, in my case, I've always enjoyed networking and talking to people. And of course, when you're in a bank branch, all of us by now have experienced sometimes the frustration that brings people into the branch.
Yes.
So it was an interesting lesson into conflict resolution and just being more attentive to what people are saying.
So was this still while you were interning, or was this your actual then first job that you got?
Actual first job. So
wow.
The internship happened for 2 months. Then I got this job. I asked for a job, and I persisted until I got the job. And then I worked during my third year of university.
So you worked in a full-time position and still studied part-time?
I studied, so I was a full-time student and
a full-time employee. Oh, working part-time. Wow. Okay. So I just want to pause there because I think this is a bit special. I don't think a lot of people maybe think that they can do this. So I love that you had the boldness to actually ask for this job and were persistent in it. And I think also the fact that people can see if someone's actually genuinely interested in learning. And I think that's what I want to bring out there. You had a passion and interest. You wanted to learn, but you also had a humility to say, I'm going to start here. And then, even though you maybe had to drop the actuarial science because you realized that's an aptitude thing, you're still doing a hard thing by studying full-time and then working part-time. I'd love you to unpack that a bit more, because I think, some people feel that the younger generation is entitled, that they're lazy, that they don't want to work. Okay, so you were also like reading industry newspapers and magazines and really being interested in how can I understand the industry? How can I add value? And then you were saying, I want to learn at ground level and, really say that this is going to be my foundation, dealing with conflict, uncomfortable things. But doing the hard things, I think, is coming across in the way that you approach that. And I think that's so amazing. I didn't know that about your story, but I love that.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. And so it was partly motivated by financial constraints as well. I had to, right? But I had to think about what was the way for me. If I look back on that time, I remember applying for sales jobs where I would have had to, be in a mall selling shampoo or something, or working like in a telesales job. I applied for so many things in my second year and third year, knowing the financial constraints at home. And so when I finally got this internship, and then I went to this branch, and I thought to myself, okay, this branch is like 5 minutes away from campus. I've been talking to the kinds of people who bank here. They seem nice. I could work in an environment like this. And so having gone through so many other interviews of work that I didn't enjoy and that didn't fit into the picture of where I saw my life going, when I finally got that internship, I was like, but this is my chance. You know, these are people who have vetted me. I can maybe talk myself into a position here because it actually aligns. Like I'd seen enough of what I didn't want to know what I wanted when I saw it and to see how it actually fit in. And it was my first real experience in complementarity. And what I mean by that is the thing that I was studying in school helped me in my branch job. Not that I was doing, you know, sharp ratios and alpha and beta testing, you know, in a branch, but even just the idea of understanding how the branch makes money, how people, how bank systems facilitate the movement of money between people. It gave me just a practical way of connecting what
very practical
into the workplace, right? And for me, the most powerful thing I have found since then is to not have too many disconnected experiences, because then your learning is fragmented, right? You will have the thing that you study as a degree, then the thing that you do as your job, and they're powerful when they overlap. And that third year, I won't lie, it was hard. I had to teach myself economics curriculum, because for me to have time to work, that meant I was not attending all of my classes. So
and
I
also not going to parties maybe on the weekends, I know, in the evenings.
Yeah, that actually all came to an abrupt end, because the fact that I wasn't attending classes meant that I had to self-study, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So I don't think I went to a single party in my third year, actually. That's
a hard thing for some young people to give up, Rumbi. Let's just say that.
But it was, I would say the word mission critical. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but I was a third year student wanting to get into banking and consulting, highly competitive, right? I didn't have money to do an honors degree. So you have to have good grades, right? So between having good grades and work experience, that was my plan to say, I know I'm not going to have as much credibility as the kids who've got a master's degree, who are further along and are applying for these investment banks and consulting firms. But this is how I'm going to shoot my shot. So I figured it's one year of sacrifice, and hopefully it works. And it did work.
So I just want to talk about how amazing it is that you were able to create an opportunity for yourself, because I think that's a massive positive shift in the narrative of I'm waiting for an opportunity, I'm looking for one, which you also did. You apply for different types of jobs. But when you got that internship, it was your like aha moment, like I can actually turn this into something real that aligns with my goals. So my first job I got because I didn't unfortunately get to study it, but I was accepted, and then there was no money and there was no real plan for my life. My parents had not completed their matric, so they didn't really know how to support me. And I couldn't just stay at home. So I walked to the local newspaper and said, I'd love to write for you. I'd love to just, you know, get practice in writing articles. And they were looking for a journalist and they employed me. And that's how I got my start there. I had no career guidance. The editor's husband said to me, Cheryl, why don't you do a communication degree through UNISA? You can do that part-time. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. That was my entry into the world of work. But I just want to talk about how valuable it is to actually have work experience while you're studying the theory. I think that is so vital, because when I started studying communication, I actually then got a job at the blood service to be a communications officer. So that way that you're putting in your theory with the practical is so important. And that's really why work experience is so important. That's why graduates struggle if they haven't had that work experience, because all that an employer wants to see is that you are hungry, you are humble, and you are smart. Like you want to learn. Those are the three things that they look for in an employee. And so that's what you showed the Standard Bank, team, to say, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to be here and do the hard work. And I think that is something that I want to emphasize, because there is no shortcut to success. It's not an easy road. It's doing the hard things, choosing to do the hard things and saying, I might not have this path that other people have, but this is my path. How can I make the best of what I have and what's at my disposal and what I'm choosing to then focus on. So that is quite amazing for me.
Thank you. And you know, what these things will also tell you is that there's a lot of value in minding the relationships that are exactly where you are, right? So I could have
Please
said,
repeat that line. I think that's brilliant.
okay, I think there's a lot of value in minding the relationships exactly where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a function of me saying, you know, when I got that internship, that was Standard Bank corporate. That was the CIB graduate program. Then our project during the internship was at a bank branch.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at the bank branch, which is retail banking, it's not corporate,
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, okay, there's a chance that they will believe I'm smart because I came through CIB.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if I ask for a job? And what
Yeah.
happens if I spend time explaining how I can add value in that environment? So instead of me saying, okay, I've done the CIB graduate program, internship program, let me go and look somewhere else for an opportunity, I said, no, I already have an in.
Leverage that, exactly. Yeah.
So I start here to
Mm-hmm.
take it to the next thing. And similarly with my finance degree, in my last year, I remember my professor being very helpful to me, and I explained my whole situation to him, and he said, look, these are the kinds of environments where you need to try to make a segue. I mentioned earlier that I was very focused on investment banking and consulting. That wasn't just an idea. That was me talking to my professor and getting his guidance to say, how do I make use of the skills that I have? And him guiding me to say, look, the best of the best in these areas, in these arenas are these companies. And that's what funneled my choices of where I was applying to. So I didn't say to myself, I'm just going to rely on the internet. I said, look, we're paying tuition. There's a professor, I can ask him questions.
Yes.
And
they actually want your help. They do.
Exactly. So how do I work with all of these professors around me? I had so many conversations, Cheryl, with every professor that I didn't care how important the course was to me. Any professor was willing to give me time in my third year. I spent time asking them what to do about my career, who they knew could help me, even if that help would just be to explain what is investment banking, right? Because then when I'm having those conversations, I can sound a lot more knowledgeable, right? And then that to me gave me a lot more confidence because I wasn't going into my final year interviews completely blind. I had some context. So mining even those relationships at school, at university, was very helpful to me.
Wow, you shared so much to unpack actually, because that is something that I'm trying to share as well in the Wholeness Work programs that I do and helping people to transition into the workplace, is that relationships is the treasure trove of resources. Because me just going into the office to ask for that job, then the editor said, hey, do this course, and then kind of working from there. Like now that I have my own business, I've seen how the relationships I've built in the university space is still actually giving me opportunities to grow and do different projects. And so we cannot underplay the importance of building those relationships, not just like, I don't really like the word networking because it often can seem as if we're trying to get something from people, but it's more connecting. And I think that's also what you do. You're a connector. So you connect with someone, and sometimes it is just to ask them for advice. So you're asking them for advice, but also it's, if you see people that could maybe connect to somebody else, it's like, hey, let me introduce you to, because I think there's some synergy or collaboration there. It's about, again, being humble, hungry, and smart, asking for that advice, being open to that advice, working hard. Let's not forget the working hard part, because a lot of your story is that. You weren't just looking, for a shortcut or for excuses. You were saying, what can I do? What do I have? Who can I ask for help? And then using those resources, you actually built your kind of career path. So I often say that most people start out their career by default. We kind of fall into things, but you definitely started out your career by design. So that's why I love your story, because there's a proactiveness there. There's an enthusiasm there. There's a looking for opportunities and writing my own story. So I want to maybe just go a bit further into once you got that first job, how did you get into the banking kind of industry a bit more? And what made you decide to take that that kind of break to look at your next pathway?
Sure. So I mentioned that, third year, the picture was becoming quite clear around investment banking and consulting. And even though I enjoyed economics and I knew that I never wanted to actually work in that environment, I viewed economics as something that would enrich my ability to understand finance. So I did not apply to anything to do with economics, even though it was my second major.
Right.
So third year comes around, I'm pretty sure I sent over 100 applications, but because then it was also a combination of, I do just need a job, right? I might have a lot of awareness about where I want to end up, but I also need to finish this third year with a job, right? So
can I just quickly ask you a question there, Rumbi? You said you sent out like 100 applications. How can someone maybe guard their heart against being disappointed at having to keep applying and not getting any response? Because often when we apply, we get no response. Just take us to that part as you continue.
My goodness, I remember, because remember I told you I had no life, right? I was grinding at my desk.
Well, you will focus on your work life.
Yes. I had no social life.
Yeah.
So if I wasn't at the bank, I was on campus. If I wasn't on campus, I was in front of my computer screen, either studying or applying. That was my whole third year, right? And so to your point about this, what I'd find very disheartening is I'd spend time crafting a tailored cover letter, filling in the application, and then you get those automated responses within 5 minutes of your submission. And you're like, you didn't even read this thing.
Yeah.
No one actually read this thing that took me maybe 2 or 3 hours to put together. And so to your point about being disheartened, because mind you, out of the 100 or so applications, only 5 called me to an interview.
Okay, so it was a 5 to 100 ratio, yeah?
Yes. So the disappointment quotient was quite high.
Yes,
right?
yeah, 95%.
Everyone belling me up saying that they wanted to offer me something, because I was a third year student in a market that had a lot of honors and master's level students, right?
Right.
So and that was part of why I knew that I had to start early in my application process. That's another thing that advise people: don't be chilling until the fourth quarter.
Agreed.
Even when you've got vacancies, you have to apply early. And the beauty of applying early is, for me, I didn't have a spreadsheet, but I was keeping track of some of the things that would help me get better. And by that, I mean, okay, do I really need a 2-page cover letter? Should it be 1 page? What happens if no one gets the second page, right? Because when you look at these systems, you start to realize that there are thousands of applicants. So I started getting better at having a 1-page thesis as to
being
why
more
you
focused.
should.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so even though I wasn't getting interviews and stuff like that, I realized, look, I have to actually refine my process, because maybe it's not clear to these people why they should invest in me. So I would improve my cover letters. And I would also focus on making sure that I wasn't applying to too many companies that were exactly the same. So if I get 5 rejections from a particular industry and they all have some things in common, like they are small enterprises, they only have space for 2 people, as an example, then maybe what I should be doing is going to the organizations that have got room for more. Because if they only have space for 2 and they're master's students out there, I'm not good value for money, right? I'm using this language now because I've got more terms, but that was my thought process, to say, I need to actually just focus on international companies, because the smaller guys, they might be advertising, but I'm taking up space where I'm not competitive. They can get more.
Again, that's very good self-awareness, that you're reflecting on your own application process. Wow.
And one of the other things that I now remember is that because I worked in a bank branch, every now and again, there'd be customers who'd say, oh, young lady, what are you doing with your life? And I'd be like, oh, I'm a student, blah, blah, blah. And these people would also give me advice to say, you talk about getting into banking, but think about this. And they'd actually give me tips on how to improve my CVs.
Amazing.
Some of them would even just give me the business cards and say, you know what? I don't have time to mentor you or whatever, but I can at least just give you tips.
I was going to
So
ask you that. Were you able to then share your CV and stuff with people and your cover letter with people so that they could give you feedback on how to make it better?
yes, so sometimes with these customers who'd come to the branch, and then also with my professor. So I wasn't just applying in a vacuum of feedback.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that's something I always encourage young people to do or looking for jobs. Don't just do the thing, like you said, in a vacuum. Get feedback, get input. And I love what you shared, that insight is so good, is to say, do a review or keep track of if something isn't working and you know that maybe you don't meet all of the criteria. If you're looking for masters and you know you're a third year student, for example, there might be a way to try and convince the person that you can actually do the job if you have that opportunity. But if it's maybe not giving you traction, then shift into a different kind of niche in that market. So I love that. That was very good advice.
Thank you. And to your point about how, right? Essentially, I didn't get discouraged because I knew that it was a numbers game, right? I was under no illusions about this. I'd gone to a couple of campus recruitment events. You go into an auditorium, there are 200 of you, and then you're being told there are only 5 slots. It tells you that you just have to up the intensity. So I won't lie, there were days where I was just losing heart. But in my case, there was no option. If I didn't have a job, I was going to go back to Zim. So I was just focused on
So you had a very strong motivation.
Exactly. I was like, look, my visa expires, I think it was January after my final exams. So I'm going to go home. Let me know that I've done everything, because I don't have time to be chilling otherwise, right? So in all those, like I said, 100 applications, 5 interviews, JP Morgan was one of them. At the time, they had a way of screening people across 7 or 8 interviews. Wow. Some of the interviews were very technical, as in, come do a case study. Others were more like a chemistry fit, where you would be working in groups and presenting things. And that was great, because there was a combination of technical work, interpersonal skills, both of which I enjoyed working on.
So there was like a kind of like a 7 or 8 phased interview process where they're kind of testing your aptitude of teamwork, technical ability, kind of around a broader range than just a one-on-one interview, and then we'll let you know.
Correct. And the good thing was that they were not all on the same day. They were spaced out. I forget the exact process, but I think it was spaced out over 2 weeks. And what I would do after every interview is send a thank you note. And also then say to them, if there's something that I can do to improve, please let me know. Sometimes people didn't give me feedback. Sometimes they did. But again, just the whole point of, because mind you, out of when you only have 5 interviews, and this, I think at that time, that was the 4th company I was interviewing with. The other ones were non-committal. So I'm now like, I need to make this work.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I went back to my professors, like, how do I talk to people like this? Like, no, just send notes, do this, and follow up. And that's what I did. And in the areas where I felt like I could have prepared better, I'd go back and do exactly what they advised me to do in terms of putting in the work. So there was that, and that led me into investment banking.
So did you get the job at JP Morgan?
Yes, I did.
Well, see, that's amazing. I think it's important to recognize that the first job process might not be easy either, but then you were already practicing doing difficult things. So it was kind of becoming your mojo, right?
Exactly. And also making sure that you choose environments that allow like a greater display of skills. If anyone who's looking at investment banking now, I think they're going to be encouraged by the fact that it's an environment that recognizes that you can come from so many disciplines, but it's the quality that determines if you can translate that into deal origination and execution. So I know so many people who did like psychology or even medicine and stuff like this, the stuff which is non-financial, and still ended up in banking, and they were amongst the best bankers. The way that they think is not bounded by saying, I have to be a finance major in order to be effective, right? So that to me, I found a very interesting part of my whole career there. I met so many interesting people from diverse backgrounds, and the things that made them effective were actually how non-financial they were, right?
Yeah, so it's a typical multidisciplinary approach, but in a very practical way.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who did psychology, for example, were very good at listening to what the client wanted. Because at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to originate deals and to have repeat business.
Exactly.
And clients work with those who they enjoy working with. There's likability matters in every profession, right?
Yeah, I just
Once
want to
you've
pause
done,
there, Rumbi. I think that's important because people do business with people that they like and trust. And the same way, they work better with people that they like and trust. So being
correct.
able to work with people is actually what I mean when I talk about the third element of being smart, like smart with people, smart with your social skills, actually adding
Yes,
value to people. Yes, please continue.
exactly. Because once you're in that particular job and work environment, the hygiene factor of your intelligence is taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
We're all smart.
It's accepted.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the expectation. And if it gets disproved by other things, you'll be worked out of the system. So everyone who's there is smart.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to get ahead just by saying, I need to show people how smart I am. It's about how well do you work with others? How well do you actually bring out the best in collective skills? And knowing that even when you're not the senior on the team, you must act like you have ownership of the things that have been put in front of you and ownership to drive team success. There are too many, I think when people start out their careers, they're waiting to be the senior and they'll just do the little corner of work. You know, I've been told to do a slide. I've been told to prepare an analysis. But then if you are, and I'm not saying to overreach in areas where you don't have competence, but the thing is when you are aware of areas where you can add value, even if they're technically not in your lane, step up and talk about it. Because you have to act like the next level that you're getting to before you're actually at that level. So if you're a junior associate wanting to become a principal, you must already act like a principal. Otherwise, people won't think to promote you as a principal. They won't know that you're ready. So you're always acting at the level that you're aspiring to, as and when you're ready to unlock those different gifts and talents.
I think that's an important point you're making, Rumbi, to be entrepreneurial in your thinking, right? So you're in a company, but you're also thinking like an entrepreneur inside the organization. Before I entered higher education, I tried my own business for about a year or 2 years. And I was just not emotionally kind of ready at that time. So then I was looking for work again. But I can tell you that once I started working again in higher education, I did not ever take my salary for granted. The way that I work changed. I started thinking, if this was my business, how would I do things? If this is my company, how would I do things? And so even though perhaps I was working in environments where people were maybe just kind of, doing what was expected and nothing more, I was challenging myself. If this is the level, then I want to be above that, because I can't just go down to this normal level. I have to rise above that level. And then that thinking is what enabled me to get the next job and the next job. And the people I worked with are still in those organizations today. I'm not saying maybe that's a bad thing, but I couldn't just be static or stable in that. I had to show that I was able to see the bigger picture. And I think that's important in any role that any graduate takes on, is to really get curious. And I love that in all of your stuff that you've been sharing, you are demonstrating this curiosity, this hunger for learning to add value. So what is the product cycle of this business? Where are there potential gaps that I can maybe notice and start thinking about how to feed those gaps and say, hey, I see this as a potential challenge. These could be the problems, this could be the solution. And when you are sharing that opinion or that input, to do it in a way that respects the current landscape, obviously, but then to show, like you said, that ownership of, I'm going to make this work. I'm not just going to be watching the time and like 5 o'clock, I'm done. I mean, sometimes you have to obviously focus on, other things, but it's about, like you said, that ownership of, I'm responsible to make this work the best way that it can. That's, yeah.
No, it's one of the easiest ways to stand out, actually. Sometimes people are so concerned with, how do I make sure my boss notices me and stuff like this. Going the extra mile in terms of product excellence is not something that is common. But I do want to distinguish that from like overworking, because sometimes people associate going the extra mile with overworking. And I think the extra mile is about understanding what is the unmet need in this environment.
Thank you for clarifying that important distinction. Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean another 20 hours per week in the office, right? So I mentioned earlier, I went into investment banking, but I didn't actually tell you what I did during that time. So I spent my 12 years doing debt capital markets, which is about raising debt financing in bond format. And bonds are basically debt instruments which allow you to syndicate it across multiple investors. The average person knows of debt in the context of you go to a bank, you apply for a loan, the bank gives you money.
Yes, but that's my context too.
But once you're a government or a big corporate, you're borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, and the bank can't do that to you. So what you want to do is to be able to break up that debt into many, many pieces, such that you can invite different investors, asset managers, insurance companies, pension funds to buy pieces of that debt. And then together, they come up with the total that you need to go away and run your business or run your economy. So it's a way of distributing the risk across lots of people.
Wow,
so
that's fascinating.
So that's what capital markets banks do. They sit in the middle to identify the clients who need to raise that scale of funding, as well as the issuance markets and issuance conditions that can help them to raise such large amounts of money. So I did that for 12 years. And I wanted to touch on this because this is also an age where people hop around a lot. And I stayed in the same environment in 12 years for a variety of reasons. One of them being that although I was working in the same product, I was exposed to a lot of different industries. So at any point in time, I could be working on a deal in West Africa for the government. Then I could be working on a deal in South Africa for a corporate that does, I don't know, petrochemicals or mining or banking. And then the next week, I'll be working on a deal in East Africa for an agricultural processing business. So from a curiosity point of view, I was always exposed to lots of different things. And debt capital markets is one of the areas that gives you the most ability to have a deep transaction experience across the continent. So oftentimes, again, depending on the team that you end up in, you can have a lot of deal flow in South Africa only, but I wanted to always have deals that would take me into the rest of Africa. So I chose to stay in that particular product.
Because you were being fulfilled in terms of your challenge and your complexity and your curiosity and building solutions. It was fulfilling in that role still.
Yes. And you can immigrate. That was always like a conversation I'd have year on year to say, is South Africa is still the right base for me? And I was also looking at the kinds of skills I got to gain because I was working in a smaller environment. So I was working in an environment where I would be, let's say, at any given point in time, one of 3 or one of 4 people on a deal team, but working on these large scale transactions. Whereas if I'd gone overseas, I'd have been part of deal teams that would be like one of 20.
Yes. Yeah.
So my ability to actually learn and be influential in a process and to drive it would have been diluted by virtue of being in a bigger team. So yes, my CV would have said London, New York, Dubai, sounds all fantastic.
Glamorous, yes.
But the learning experience and the ability to say that if I have a title that says I'm a vice president or an executive director, the ability to back that up with rich experience was, I could see better progression to go deep with my career by choosing the environment that I did. So that to me, both of those things mattered. The quality of the learning experience and the ability to have ownership in the team versus being one of many. And I know that we're all quite different in that regard, but to me, it was a valuable requirement. And if you were to read books such as So Good They Can't Ignore You, I've forgotten the author's name now, but there's also another one called Drive by Daniel Pink.
Oh,
Both
yes.
of these, Cal Newport wrote So Good They Can't Ignore You. Both of these books talk about how true work fulfillment is rooted in things such as autonomy. That means I get to do what I want. I get to choose the path that I take. Mastery, that means I get to be very good at the path that I've chosen. And then also the ability to have deep relationships with others. And that means for me,
to be recognized for your work. Yes. Recognition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because once you have mastery, the ability for that to be recognized by peers and clients, etc., is important. So for me, hopping around, and I'm not saying that hopping around is bad, but I wasn't, having been exposed to lots of different things in the bank, there wasn't another thing that I wanted to achieve mastery in. And mastery allows you to be autonomous. So if I am good at something and I decide that my way of working has certain quirks, like I work from home once a week or something like this, I can command that because I have mastered something, and my boss will know that if Rumbi is doing in her way, it will still get done, right? So that actually adds to the fulfillment in the workplace of saying, if I'm doing it my way and it's actually working, that I find fulfilling. So I say that because sometimes happiness in the workplace, we confuse that with happiness as in happiness in our personal lives. Fulfillment at work can take on many different forms that can be excitement, but if you actually are autonomous, have mastery, and have connectedness, you can fulfill that work even if you don't have a happy, clappy feeling that you associate with work.
Yeah, there's a deeper sense of I'm adding value to something and I can see the results of my work. So just actually reflecting on what you shared there, in higher education, it took me a while to figure this out. So I didn't maybe have that level of self-awareness you did at the time, but I loved being able to raise money for students who needed funding because I knew that was something I wish I had. So I felt like a kind of poetic justice. I was doing this great thing. But my personality type was just not cut out for higher education. The bureaucracy, we'll see what the slow pace of work, people can be very serious and I need to have like fun at work. It took me 3 different jobs in higher education to realize, wait a second, I'm still getting, this amazing kind of feeling of like purpose in my work because I know I could raise money and I could become a great fundraiser. I was mastering the skill I didn't know I had. But then the environment was actually choking me and it was burning me out. And it was only when, unfortunately, there was a student I was very involved with and he died by suicide. That was like a turning point for me to realize that as much as I love the work that I'm doing, I'm seeing a gap in terms of work readiness, in terms of like a greater sense of personal growth and development to enable these graduates to really thrive. And so there was an underlying sense of there was something that was burgeoning in me, but I hadn't given myself permission to actually train and coach. And so when I started integrating that, I realized that the work I was doing on weekends and part-time was more energizing than coming to the office and sitting in meetings and feeling like, oh, we're not going anywhere, So I was one of those that did move around a lot, but I didn't know why. I would just get bored doing the same thing. I wanted challenge, I wanted to grow. And so actually stepping out of that industry, I've had to tap into the mastery element of this is actually what I know is my sweet spot. I love to find ways to help people to connect to the treasure inside of them. I love connecting to people like yourself that is passionate about development, telling the stories. I mean, all of the work I've done in my 3 careers has prepared me for this time, And so I love that you're sharing your career journey because everyone's story is unique and different, but we can learn so much from each other. And so I had to step out of an industry to be able to support and help in that space. And I think what you're sharing there is for people to really be aware of what am I enjoying? What am I really enjoying in my work? What is the stuff that I'm really not enjoying? To kind of to notice that, to be aware of that. And am I really reaching out into my network, people around me? Am I talking? Am I asking for help? Am I getting advice? because we don't have to stay stuck in our careers. We can actually look for opportunities, create opportunities. We can be the author of our own lives when it comes to our work. So what was the thing for you, Rumbi, that led to your hiatus, I want to say, in terms of your career? Because you obviously, based on your story, you're always someone who has the next step in mind. So can you share a bit about that for us on your sabbatical?
Sure. So I took the sabbatical after 12 years of investment banking. And at the time, I knew that I had gone as far as I could in that particular environment, but I wasn't sure of what next. So in as much as
okay, that's interesting. So you weren't sure of the next step as much.
I wasn't sure.
Okay.
But I had there were breadcrumbs. So there was like a little trail to follow.
Okay.
But it wasn't yet defined. So I knew that if I stayed in the same environment, it would be hard to ideate a new version of the future, because it's a very intense environment. You know, not all jobs are the same, but in that context, it's very absorptive. My days were still quite long, even though I was an executive director at the time. So I said to myself, I need to actually create physical distance from the life I've known in order to chart a new direction. And I knew
some breathing room. Yeah.
Exactly. I knew that I was interested in digital transformation. So I'd already signed up to do a master's in that. And I knew that I would eventually get back into something philanthropy related, which is what this logo on the other side is. This initiative that I've started with the Gen Z connection. I knew that there were these threads that I wanted to work on, but I didn't know in what manner and at what pace. So the sabbatical was not to Netflix and chill. The sabbatical was really
we didn't think that you would do that, Rumbi, I think.
Yeah,
maybe for a day, but you wouldn't last for more than a day.
Exactly. So the sabbatical was to say that I have many interests, but they need time to be unearthed. And sometimes if you try to do everything in the same environment, your new ideas can fail to grow because they're not being properly nurtured. They're not bad ideas, but they just need the right conditions. So that
they need new soil. Yeah.
Exactly. That was my whole intention, was to say, I'm not just going to sit and do nothing, but I want to have space to try new things. And even just to realize that, life is long. Like we don't have to have this attitude towards work that is restrictive, right? You work to be purposeful, and of course to earn an income as and when you need, but that shouldn't oppress you, right? So
thank you for saying that, because I'm trying to challenge that narrative about work. Work does not have to be a curse in our life. It can be something that actually energizes you and could be fun. I mean, imagine.
and that's where I'm at now, because I've chosen things that better align with my particular energy in this season. Banking did align for a season.
Yes.
But what I've become very attuned to is that knowing when to leave is a skill. And that way you preserve the magic of what you enjoyed about the previous place and leaving it as a baggage-free experience as you go on to the next one. Because if you keep on trying to extract new feelings from something that's run its course, you can resent something that was good for a season, but you've simply outgrown it and you need a new environment to explore the new parts of you that have matured over the however many years you've been doing the previous thing.
I think you just described my last job in higher education there.
Yeah, it was good, but it's really important to know when to leave, especially with jobs, because that rut that people feel, they ascribe it to the job, but it's not actually the job. It's the fact that they changed. And now that you've changed, this is no longer the environment for you, but nothing's actually wrong with the job.
Yeah, there's underlying reasons for why you hate your job, and it's not your manager's job to figure it out. You have to figure it out and fix it.
Exactly. So that's what led to the sabbatical. I was off for about 18 months. And to me, it was just the best thing I could have ever done. It's actually the best investment I've ever made in myself.
Tell us why.
It clarified it clarified for me what my growth has been and what I wanted to be like going forward. Because you can feel that you're different, but you have to actually know how to harness your skills and personality, and then say, now that I know what I'm about, how do I actually get this to work for me? And I think Simon Sinek, in his book, in one of his books to do with clarifying purpose, he said, you can either be a puzzle piece trying to fit into different organizations, or you can be a magnet and use your self-awareness of what you're good at to attract the opportunities that naturally allow you to thrive.
And I prefer to be a magnet.
A magnet. Yeah, because then what you're really doing is you're magnifying your strengths and you're managing your weaknesses, right? Growing up in school environments that teach us to be all-rounders. And I think that's good up until a certain hygiene level, right?
Yes.
So if your weakness is procrastination, right? Don't let it get in the way of your future. Don't be so late to interviews that it makes people not want to hire you, right? Don't have such bad habits that people don't like working with you. Are you going to be perfect at everything? No, but improve your weaknesses to the point that they don't get in the way of your progress. And then once you've done that basic upgrading, magnify your strengths, then you get really good at the things that make you amazing. And if you're aware of that, your ability to even identify the jobs that allow your magnet to be effective is different, because you're even aware of how that is the better strategy for you. Right?
And it can happen when you're younger, I think, with the right support, like you said, Rumbi, but I think also you do need that early career foundation to be able to get to that point of mastery and that becoming a magnet, because those things all build you up for the kind of next stage. So again, I want to just maybe bring out the point that there's no short circuit to that. We can't all be billionaires at 21 because we are Kardashian, right? So if we're not that, then what can we do? Asking yourself the questions you did when you were studying. Those things have all built you up as a foundational to be able to get to your kind of more mid-stage career, and then say, now I can actually build what I'm wanting to build because I know my value, I know my skill sets, I have evidence in the market, people know me. I've also built up a very important network. I think that we cannot minimize too much, because you have to build those relationships in order for you to get to a stage where now you say, I can actually decide what the next half of my career is going to look like.
Exactly. And I think when you even for that choice, right? I spoke to you about complementarity before. The degree that I studied feeds into the work I do now, working for a fintech that specializes in payments and social media. That degree is also what helped me to think about how, if I want to be a mentor, what's the best way to go about that? Am I really just going to spend time one-on-one, or am I going to think about a digital model of some sort? So I allow it to influence everything that I'm doing, because I don't study, and I don't think that's my last degree, but I don't study to get a job. I study to improve my thinking. And that thinking should actually
Please repeat that. Sorry, Rumbi. Please repeat that. That was also very good. I don't study to
get a job. I study to improve my thinking. And you might
that needs to be on a t-shirt. I'm sorry, that is so good.
And that was even the case even in university, right? I'm very big on personal finance. So this is not something that I'm saying just because I've had a long career doing one thing and I'm older. Even when I was at university doing my finance degree, the fact that I was working in a branch, I got very good at personal finance. I don't know if you've ever noticed that some people are good, they work in certain industries, but then when you see how it affects their personal life, there's a disconnect.
Yeah, it's like the plumber who doesn't fix his own toilet. Yes.
So that was not the case for me. I got into finance, and even in my personal life, I got very good at that. Anyone who knows is always asking me for advice about finances, etc. And same thing with digital transformation. So I think we must choose things that allow us to really go deep, because that's when you tap into mastery, 2, you tap into flow. And flow for me is that state where you enjoy what you're doing so much, you have the aptitude to learn more. It's challenging but not overwhelming, and that allows you to enjoy it and you want to get better and better at it. Not perfect, but enough to really just understand that it's something that can have cross-functional application in your life.
So I love that you just shared so much about your journey, and I want to try and crystallize that for the listeners and the viewers today. Essentially, when you're starting out in terms of thinking about where you want to go to, is pay attention to your interests, even if they do seem to be opposing or contradictory. Try and see how you can give enough attention to that. Do the hard things and keep doing difficult things. Take accountability, be proactive, build solid relationships, ask for advice. These are all the things that I'm picking out from our very, very rich conversation this morning. And then the mastery element is, because we talk about the future of work, and this is what I focus on a lot to help young people navigate this, because it can be scary and overwhelming. And when I was shifting multiple jobs and multiple careers, and people said, Cheryl, why are you moving around so much? What's wrong with you? Now I'm saying I'm the poster child for the world of work. You don't just get the one job, you are going to have multiple careers. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking about, how do I prepare my daughter for the multiple careers that she will have in her life? I see that she's interested in medical things and being a doctor. So we buy her a doctor set, but we also teach her about, when she says, Mommy, this doesn't work, I say, no, my love, ask the question, how can I make it work? So I'm very aware of things. I'm teaching her about money management before she turns 3, because this is where our money habits are forming and our money concepts are forming, So yeah, work readiness starts at home. But what I'm trying to say with that is that it is a journey. It is a process. And what I love from your story, and what I hope to inspire people by sharing your story, is that there is no shortcut. It is going to be difficult work, but you are building your life, and aren't you worth fighting for? I think that's really what I love about your story, is that you were on this like deadline crunch. My visa's expiring, I have to make this work, so we have to find ways that motivates us to get to the next thing. I had to start working. I didn't have an option. I didn't have money. So that's how I started. And I studied part-time. And for a long time, I felt like, because I didn't study full-time, that I didn't have a proper education, which is actually not true, because my work experience is what helped me to get other opportunities, and I learned differently perhaps then, so it's like accepting that your story is unique. Starting to see yourself as a valuable person, I think, is so important, and asking people for help and feedback and being open to that, and then applying it. Don't just ask for advice and don't take it. Like, take the advice and build that. So Rumbi, I know you also do a lot of work around equipping young people and sharing your story. Where can we find some of your content, and maybe some links to websites that people can get more information about your journey?
Sure. So, like I was saying earlier, one of the outcomes of my sabbatical is just is having clarity around wanting to share more about what I know, even the lessons that I'm still learning, right? Because
we're always learning. Yes.
Exactly. So that's where, especially if you're in that Gen Z age group, so 25 and under, you can find some cool resources that I think will resonate at www.genzim.com. And we're also on Instagram at Genzim Connection, as well as on YouTube. There's a channel under the Genzim Connection as well. And then outside of that, especially for professionals who've already begun their working careers and are still thinking about where to from here, you can find me on my personal blog, which is www.rumbimunyaradzi.com. And I think the easier thing will just be to also just include some notes.
I will definitely put all the links in the show notes, don't worry.
Exactly. So it's those two main resources, my personal blog and then the Genzim website as well.
Rumbi, you've shared so many insights with us, some great one-liners that I'm going to go back to and pull out and summarize for people who want to watch this video and listen to the podcast. Any closing statement to inspire someone who's feeling a bit lost in their career? Maybe they're just starting out and don't know where to go, or they're about to transition and they're feeling that pressure of, I'm stuck, I'm not sure. What insight can you share with them that can maybe help them to get clarity for the next step?
I mentioned earlier that I left not knowing what I wanted, but I had created a framework to get there, right? So I had talked about studying. I had saved before, right? So I would say don't worry about the complete picture. Worry about what is the next good thing, the next helpful thing, the next right thing that can help you to demystify the whole thing. Because you're not, from my personal experience, there wasn't a day where I said, I'm gonna start this website, I'm gonna go into digital transformation. It was so many pieces coming together over a series of reflections. But what I would do at each point in time is to say, okay, I've got a day where I've got 2 hours available. What is the best way to spend this time to address this big challenge that I've set for myself, to find my purpose, to find more fulfilling work and all these other things? So I was just focusing on, according to the day, what is the optimal use of my time? What's the next best thing I can do? So if you know that this is the area that you are seized with improving and clarifying for yourself, always think to yourself, what is the micro experiment that you can try? What is the small thing, small step you can take towards it? And in as much as we talk about, planning and the like, experiments are important. If you think you would like to do a particular career, what's the experiment you can run? Can you meet someone in that space? Can you attend a conference or a workshop? Something that actually makes it tangible, right? Because you can spend too much time up here and not enough time in the real world putting these ideas to practice. So don't worry about arriving, just worry about the small steps that can create a journey. And as you do that, the one, taking the steps makes you more confident. 2, the environment that you're experiencing as you're on that journey informs your thought process, and you'll realize it's actually not that complicated, but it does require you to be effortful and consistent.
I love that. Don't worry about arriving, but think about the next steps along the journey. And also remember that Rumbi got a lot of advice and experience from people around her by asking for help. So I am a career coach. I'd love to help you along your journey. I'm the wholeness guide, Cheryl Bernardi. So I'm also willing to help you if you're stuck and feeling like you need to transition, because often it's just having someone to walk through like the dark part of the forest for you to see the light. So please reach out if you'd love some support in that process. Rumbi, thank you so much for your time. We could talk for hours about this, and maybe we'll do some workshops together. We'll see what the future holds for us, or what we create for the future. But thank you so much for your time, and it's been fascinating for me and very inspiring, and I hope we can inspire others as well.
Thanks for the invitation, and I hope it does help someone on the other end of this who needs either reinforcement or new inspiration.
If we can do it, then so can they. That's the point of these podcasts. Thank you so much, Rumbi.
You're welcome.